They would argue about it for a long time afterward, the whole court of Duncaro, and in the end, most of them agreed it had been Sorrel's fault. She was, after all, the one who climbed onto a bench in a hall full of her betters and told the most powerful wolf in the realm that he ran his own borders like a man asleep in the saddle. That part was true. What the tellers left out, because it spoiled the shape of the story, was that she had been right, and that if the king had troubled to look at his own marches even once in 3 long years, there would have been nothing for a beast-tongued nobody to stand up and say at all. So if one wished to be fair, and the court of Duncaro almost never did, the whole business was his fault. Every last howl of it, but that came later. On the night it began, Sorrel wanted nothing except to give her report and be gone before anyone made her talk. The muster hall at Greywater stank of wet wool and spilled ale, and she stood at the foot of the long table with mud to her knees and the cold of the ghostwood still in her bones. She had run most of the way. The wild packs did not warn twice, and what they had told her that afternoon had put a fist of ice in her chest. "Say it again," said the Marcher Lord at the head of the table, a soft heavy man named Corliss who had never once set foot past the tree line. "Slowly, for those of us who do not speak dog." The table laughed. She let it pass over her the way she let rain pass over her, which was to say she hated it and gave it nothing. "The packs in the Northwood are running," she said. "Not hunting, running. Something has come into the deep wood from over the fords, and it has frightened the wild ones badly enough that they abandoned 3 winters of dens in a single day. Wolves do not leave a den for nothing. They are telling us the border is open." "The dogs are telling us," Corliss repeated and smiled so everyone would know a joke was coming. "Do the squirrels have an opinion as well?" More laughter. Sorrel had grown up on this laughter. She had been 11 the first time a room of grown wolves decided that a girl who could hear the wild packs was not gifted but broken, a thing to keep at the tree line where the court did not have to look at her. "4 patrols have not come back from the North Fords this month," she said, and her voice did not shake, which she counted a victory. "The grain promised to Thornkeep never came. The spears we requisitioned came as staves. Someone is hollowing this border from the inside while the wild ones scream that something comes from the outside, and every one of you would rather laugh at the beast girl than ride out and look. The king sits warm in Duncaro and lets his marches rot from the roots up, and none of you will say so because you are afraid of him." It was a great deal more than she had meant to say. It was, word for word, the thing the Warden General had been saying quietly for 2 years, and she had carried his anger in her mouth so long she had forgotten it was borrowed. The hall had gone very quiet. "Strong words," said a dry voice from the bench by the fire. She had not marked him sitting there. A traveller in a plain road cloak, the hood up despite the heat, a cup of dark ale in one hand he had not touched. "True words," she said. "A king ought to know what happens in his own house," the stranger agreed pleasantly. "Perhaps the Marcher Lords who take his coin to guard his fords have found it easier to laugh at a warden than to write him an honest letter." That startled a silence out of the table. Corliss went the color of tallow. "You would say that to his face, would you?" Sorrel said, too far gone to stop. "I would say worse. The trouble I find is getting anyone else to." "Then you have never met a king. They do not want the truth. They want the warm hall and the beast girl kept out at the tree line so the smell of the real border never reaches them. If I stood before him I would tell him he has slept 3 years and the waking will cost him blood." "Would you?" said the stranger, and reached up unhurried and pushed back the hood. Sorel's first thought, quick and traitorous and entirely her own, was that it was not fair for a face to do that in firelight. Her second thought, a full and terrible beat behind, was that she knew it. It was the face on the seal she pressed into the wax of every report. The whole hall was on its feet now and folding down at the knee, and Corliss was saying, "Your Grace," in a voice like a man swallowing a stone. King Emeric of Duncaro smiled at her the way a wolf smiles, with every tooth and no comfort in it at all. "Go on," he said gently. "You were telling me I have been asleep." Somewhere below her panic, the animal part of Sorel understood she should get down and beg. The rest of her, cold and furious and sick of 3 years of laughter, had other plans. "You are shorter than the seal," she heard herself say. "Am I?" His mouth twitched. "I shall have the die recut. And you, Warden, have told a hall of my lords that my border is open and my wolves afraid, and I a fool who will pay in blood. That is a great deal to be sure of." "I am sure of it. Sure enough to stake something on it." The dare hung there, bright as a drawn blade, and every soul in the hall leaned toward it. She should have looked away. She looked him dead in his pale eyes instead and felt the whole reckless weight of her life tip forward off a very high place. My head, Sorrel said, ride to the North Fords tonight, this hour, and if the wild ones lie, if the fords are quiet and the border whole, then take my head and be done with the beast girl forever. But if I am right, your grace, if you find what I know you will find, then you will owe this border far more than an apology, and I mean to collect it. The king went very still. He opened his mouth to answer. She never heard a word of it. Because in that moment, from the black woods beyond the walls, every wolf in the northern ghostwood began to howl at once, and it was not a hunting cry, and it was not a warning any longer. It was too late for warnings. Somewhere past the fords, the thing the wild ones had run from had finished coming, and the hall of Greywater erupted around her into shouting and drawn steel, and the terrible dawning quiet of men realizing the beast girl had been right. Sorrel woke to the conviction that she had made the single worst mistake of her life, and to the smell of burnt porridge, which at Thornkeep amounted to much the same thing. For a moment she let herself believe it had been a dream. Then the night came back in hard bright pieces that fit together all too well. The hall, the laughter, the hood coming off an unhurried hand, her own flat voice saying, "You are shorter than the seal to the Alpha King of the realm," and then, Gods keep her, staking her own head on a dare in front of every marcher lord between here and the sea. She pressed the heels of her hands into her eyes until she saw stars. "She lives," said a voice from the ladder. Neve stood at the top of it with her arms folded, older than Sorrel by a decade and dry as a summer well, and behind her hovered Rook, 17 and unable to keep a thought off his face. It plainly hung on this one. "What did they find?" Sorrel said. She did not bother to ask whether they had found anything. The wild ones did not warn twice. Nave came up the last rungs. The North Ford post, or what is left of it, 9 men gone, the palisade torn open from the outside, tracks in the mud the trackers will not name aloud. Whatever the packs ran from came through in the night exactly where you said it would. You were right, Sorrel, about all of it. She had wanted to be right for 11 years. She had never imagined it would feel like a stone going down and down into a well and never striking water. Then why do the two of you look as though you are at my funeral? Rook opened his mouth. Neve stepped on his foot. He said it anyway because he was Rook. Because being right about the border does not undo telling the king to his face that he is a sleeping fool. In front of Lord Corliss, who has hated you since you were small and has been in the yard since dawn telling anyone who will hold still that a warden threatened the crown. I did not threaten the crown. You dared the king to take your head, Neve said. That is generally filed near threatening the crown. Sorrel sat with it. She had spent her whole life being careful and small, the beast girl who took the laughter and gave nothing back, because she had understood since she was small that a warden with no name and no house had exactly one thing, which was her post, and that the post could be taken by any lord who woke disliking her. Last night she had climbed on a bench and handed Corliss the knife. "It will be the post," she said. "Best case, only the post." She heard how thin it sounded. A king who let a nameless warden mock him in open hall and walk off unbothered only invited the next warden and the next. He could not afford to let it pass. The worst of it was that she could not remember what he had decided, because she had never heard it. He had opened his mouth and the world had started howling, and whatever Emmerich meant to do with her had drowned in it. If only she could remember his face in that last moment. All she had was the pale eyes, and the wolf's smile, and the pleasant patience of a man who had not yet decided how much a thing would cost. The door below banged open. "Sorrel." It was one of the gate lads, breathless. "The Warden General wants you. Now." Rook's hopeful look folded itself away somewhere safe. She went down through Thornkeep to the low stone room Alden kept when he came out from his own hall, and prayed the whole way to gods she did not much believe in, that he did not yet know the whole of it. He stood at the arrow slit with his back to the door, a big grey wolf of a man gone soft only at the edges. He had ridden out to a burnt steading 19 years ago and found a child in the ash who could not speak to people, but could quiet a snarling wild she-wolf with a look, and he had, against every counsel, carried her home instead of leaving her to the winter. He had given her the tree line and a purpose no one else could hold. When the hall laughed, She had always been able to tell herself that one wolf in the world had looked at a broken beast girl and seen something worth keeping. "Tell me the whole has it wrong," Alden said without turning, very quietly. "Tell me you did not stand on a bench and dare the king to take your head." "Sir, I can explain." There was nothing to explain, and they both knew it. He turned, and the man who had faced down a border war without blinking now looked simply and openly afraid, and that frightened her more than anything Corliss could have said. "He does not need to be angry," Alden said. "He is the king. He does not need a reason, and he does not need a temper. He can do whatever he likes with you, and not a lord in this keep would raise his voice to stop it. We need to build you a defense before he sends word." Here was the man who had believed in her when no one bothered to look, and she had repaid him by becoming the joke of the whole march in a night. Shame closed her throat. "Sir," she began, "everything I said, it was only ever what you have always—" The bell above the gate began to ring. Alden's head came up, not the alarm bell, not the hour bell. The low bronze toll kept for one purpose only, an arrival of rank, and no one had cleared it with him. "That is the gate," he said very low, "an arrival at my marches, and no one sent me word." His frown went cold. Whatever was coming had gone clean over the head of the Warden General of these marches, and there was only one wolf in the realm who could do that. She watched the same impossible thought reach him in the breath it reached her. Footsteps in the passage, not the tramp of a detail sent to make an arrest. One man, unhurried, easy, coming this way. The footsteps stopped outside the door, and Sorel's heart slammed once, hard, because the king had not sent word. The king had come himself. The door opened and the king of the realm walked into the little grey room, and the room changed. Sorrel felt it before she had fully turned, the air drawing tight the way it does before a storm breaks, her own wolf coming to attention beneath her skin whether she willed it or not. She had known he was the king, but the hooded traveler had let her forget. This one let no one forget anything. He filled the doorway and then the room, broad and unhurried, the plain road cloak gone, and what stood in its place was the weight of him, the total certainty of a wolf who had never once needed to raise his voice to be obeyed. Drunk on her own anger, she had called him asleep. Standing here with her head still owed to him, she understood she had been very stupid indeed. "Ah," said King Emmerich, and looked at her with open delight. "There she is, my honest warden." Alden was already bowing. "Your Grace, forgive us. My warden was gravely out of line last night, and the fault is mine for keeping her too long at the tree line and too far from courtesy. If there is discipline owed, let it be mine to give, and let it be quiet." The king listened with his head tilted, and Sorrel had the strange sense he was not only hearing the words, but weighing them, turning Alden over like a coin held to the light. Then he was smiling again. "Discipline," he repeated, as though tasting something unfamiliar. "General, I do hope you do not mean to discipline the one soul in these marches who told me the truth. I should take it very personally." A beat of pure silence. "Your Grace," Alden tried. "She dared you to take her head." "She did." The pale eyes came to Sorrel and stayed. "And then the wild ones opened the north fords precisely as she swore they would, and 9 of my men are dead, and every lord in that hall who laughed at her owes her his life or will before this is done. So I am not much inclined to take her head, General. I am inclined to take her advice, and her, more generally. She wagered something last night, and I have come to collect the other half of it." Sorrel's stomach dropped clean through the floor. "Your Grace, whatever I said, I was—" "Correct," he supplied. "You were correct. It is a rare and upsetting quality, and I mean to keep it close. Warden Sorel, from this hour you are under the king's own protection, and you do not leave my side until the thing that crossed my border is dead, and the border shut behind it. You said you would show a king how the true march lives. Very well. Show me. I dare you." The room did not breathe. Alden's face had gone through several colors and settled on none of them. "Your Grace," he said carefully, "you cannot mean to keep a warden at your side. A nameless girl, forgive me, with no house and no rank and a great deal of talk about her already. The court will say—" "The court will say what the court always says," Emmerich agreed pleasantly, "that the king has lost his wits or his heart or both over a beast girl from the tree line. Let them. It will keep them entertained while the grown wolves do the work." He smiled. and there was iron under it now, just for a moment, the sharp thing under the easy face. I have made my decision, General. See that a chamber is made ready near mine for the warden, and do increase the watch. The business at the forge sits very ill with me. Alden bowed, because there was nothing else a wolf could do to a king, and Sorel watched something close behind his eyes as he straightened. As your grace wills, he said. Thank you for your care of my marches. Then, because he had no choice at all, he went, and the latch clicked, and she was alone with the king. Your grace, she said at once, last night I was far out of line. I insulted you, and what I did after I have no defense for. I will take whatever the general sees fit. There is no need to drag the crown into a farce, or to make a spectacle of keeping me. You need not pretend I am anything worth keeping at your side. I know exactly what I am. Emmerich dropped into the room's one chair as though it were a throne, and considered her. And what are you? He asked. Exactly. A beast girl who hears wolves, useful in a wood, an embarrassment in a hall. You know it as well as the rest of them. She had meant it flatly, as fact, the way she had said it to herself 10,000 times. Something in his face went still at it, though. Some quick flicker that was gone before she could name it. And when he spoke, his voice had lost a little of its play. I know, he said, that every lord out here has spent 3 years writing me warm letters about a quiet border while my patrols vanished and my grain turned to staves. And I know one warden with no house and nothing to gain climbed onto a bench and told me the truth to my face when it could have cost her everything. Do you understand how rare that is? I could search my whole court and not find its equal. The play came back into his eyes, a door closing over something. So no. You will not talk me out of you. I have quite made up my mind. I am a king. It is very restful. I never have to. He rose, pausing at the threshold. Rest today, he said. At first light you take me into your wood, and you show me what the wild ones ran from, and we begin to make good on your wager. Wear whatever you like. A glance, amused, down and up. Though I am given to understand it is customary when one dines with the king to make some small effort. We are not dining, we are hunting a thing that killed 9 men. Then make an effort not to be killed. I should hate to lose you so soon. He winked and then he was gone, and the careful apology she had built was still sitting in her mouth with nowhere on earth to go. Sorrel stood a long moment in the empty room. Then, because it was the only thing that had ever steadied her, she closed her eyes and reached out past the stone, past the yard, out to the wild ones ranging uneasy at the tree line, and asked them what they smelled. They gave it back to her at once, and it turned her cold. Danger. Yes. The thing beyond the fords, the new and wrongly smelling thing out in the deep wood, that fear she already knew. But underneath it, threaded through it, closer, was another unease entirely. The wild ones did not like something inside the walls, something that moved through Thornkeep wearing a friendly shape, something that had been here a long time and smelled, very faintly, of the same wrongness as the thing across the fords. Sorrel opened her eyes and stared at the door the warden general had just walked out of, and for the first time in 19 years, she did not want to follow him through it. She had expected the king to slow her down. That was the thing Sorrel had told herself all through the sleepless dark, that a court wolf in fine boots would flounder in the ghost wood and complain of the wet and turn back by noon, and she could go on hating him in peace. It was a comforting picture. It lasted exactly as long as it took him to fall into step at the tree line, drop to one knee at the first broken fern without being told, and read the crossing off the bent stems as cleanly as she could have herself. North and east, Emmerich said. Moving fast, not feeding. He looked up. Correct me. You are not wrong, she admitted, which cost her. High praise. I shall have it carved above my bed. They went in under the black pines with the mist still on the ground, and the deeper they went, the less she thought about his boots. He moved through her wood the way she did, low and quiet and watchful, and he did not fill the silence, and when she stopped to listen, he stopped too, and waited on her without a word, as though her listening were a thing worth the king of the realm standing still for. No one had ever waited on her listening. Here he simply watched her face and let her work, and something in her chest she had kept clenched for 19 years loosened half a turn before she caught it and clenched it tight again. Tell me what you hear, he said low. The near packs, frightened, circling wide of the deep wood. She closed her eyes and reached, the way she had reached 10,000 times, out along the warm living threads of them. They will not go north of the split oak. They say the ground past it has gone quiet. Quiet is good, surely. No. She opened her eyes. A wood is never quiet. Birds, voles, the little lives underneath. When a stretch of wood goes quiet, it means something has emptied it. And the wild ones cannot tell me what, because when they get near enough to smell it, their minds go. She stopped because she did not have a word for the thing she had felt at the edge of the pack's fear, a smear of wrongness where a wolf's mind should be. They found the split oak by midday, and past it the wood was quiet exactly as promised, and in the soft ground beyond it they found the first of them. It had been a wolf once, a wild one, grey and rangy, one of her own far-ranging packs. It lay in the leaf mold with its eyes open and its flanks heaving, and it was not dead. And when Sorrel dropped beside it and reached for its mind, the way she had reached for 1,000 hurt and dying wild ones before it, she found nothing there to reach. No pain, no fear, no wolf. Only that smear of wrongness, cold and purposeful, wearing the animal like a glove. She snatched her mind back so hard she rocked on her heels. Sorel! Emmerich had a hand on her shoulder. What is it? It is empty. Her voice did not sound like her own. Something has hollowed it out and is walking it like a puppet. I have never, in my whole life I have never once failed to hear a wolf, and this, there is nothing here to hear. She looked up at him and hated how frightened she sounded. The one thing I am good for in this world does not work on them. He crouched to her level, and he did not tell her it would be all right, and he did not tell her she was mistaken, which she noticed. Then we have learned something the wild ones could not tell us, he said steadily. That whatever crossed my fords does not come alone. It brings a way to make wolves into weapons and turn a warden's own gift blind. That is worth the walk. That is worth you. A beat. Can it hear you, do you think, when you reach for it? The question landed cold, because she had not thought of it, and the moment she did, she knew the answer. Yes, she whispered. It felt me, just now. It felt me looking. The hollow wolf lunged. She was already moving, shoving the king back and down, and the thing came off the ground faster than any hurt animal had a right to, and it went not for her, but straight past her, for him, for the throat of the alpha king, and she caught it in the air with both hands buried in its ruff and all her weight, and they went over together into the wet leaves. It did not fight like a wolf. It felt no pain and it made no sound, and it kept trying for Emmerich with a single cold purpose while she wrenched its head around, and then his knife was there, quick and certain, and without any of the ease gone out of his hands, and it was over. Silence crashed back. Her arm was torn and bleeding. The wood, very slowly, began to make its small living sounds again. Well, said Emmerich, sitting up, entirely calm. You do know how to show a wolf a memorable morning? She stared at him. He was breathing hard, but there was no shock in his face, none at all, only a grim and thoughtful attention, as though this confirmed a thing he had suspected rather than told him something new. He tore a strip from the hem of his own shirt before she could stop him, took her arm in both hands, and began to bind the wound with a care that did not match anything she knew about kings. She should have pulled away. She watched him instead. You will ruin your shirt, she said. I have others. I have at last count an obscene number of shirts. Hold still. He wound the linen tight and neat and did not look up. You put yourself between a king and a set of teeth just now without a heartbeat of thought. Why? It is my post. It is not your post. Your post is to walk the tree line and hear the wild ones. No one has asked you to bleed for the crown. He tied off the binding and finally looked at her, and the play had gone out of his face. Every lord I own would have stood frozen and let that thing take my throat, while they decided whether it was beneath them to move. You did not decide. You are the sharpest blade on this whole rotting border, warden, and they have kept you at the tree line, filing you down to a butter knife and calling it kindness. It is the single greatest waste in my kingdom, and I have a great many wastes to choose from. Heat climbed her throat that had nothing to do with the wound. No one had ever said such a thing to her. She did not know where to put it, so she looked at the dead thing in the leaves instead. You should not say things like that to people. They start to believe them. Good, said Emmerich. That is generally the aim of speech. You are not surprised, she said, turning back to the fight, needing the firmer ground of it. Something crawls out of the deep wood and goes straight for your throat, and you are not the least bit surprised. You expected this. The pieces turned over in her hands, and she did not like the shape they made. This is not the first time someone has tried to put you in the ground, is it, Your Grace? For half a breath, something real showed behind the pale eyes, tired and old and carefully hidden. Then he smiled and reached for her torn arm. You are bleeding, he said gently. Let me see to that. She did not give him the arm. Who are you, she thought, watching him. A fool I keep mistaking for a king, or a king who has spent a great deal of care teaching the world he is a fool. She did not know. But her gift, which had never once lied to her, had gone strange and warm at the edges every time he stood close. And the list of things about this man that did not add up had just grown one grave line longer. And out past the split oak, in the emptied dark where her mind could not follow, something that had felt her looking turned its cold attention toward the girl who could almost hear it, and began patiently to come. For the better part of a fortnight, Sorrel tried to work out what the king was hiding. It was the only sensible response to a man who had been hunted through his own wood by a thing with no mind, and laughed it off with a joke about shirts. Someone wanted Emmerich dead. She knew it the way she knew weather. So she did what she was good at. She watched, she gathered. The fine chamber they had readied for her near the king's own, as he had ordered, she had not slept a night in, keeping to the warden's loft, where she built theories in the dark and pulled them down by morning. Perhaps the whole business of keeping her at his side was a blind, a way to have a body between himself and a blade that no one at court would think to question. Perhaps he suspected someone near him and needed a pair of eyes that owed nothing to any house. Perhaps, and this was the theory she liked least and returned to most, he simply enjoyed watching the beast girl trip over herself. The king did not cooperate with any of it. She would ask him a sharp question and he would answer with a joke. She would press and he would flirt, sliding the talk 3 topics sideways so smoothly she would not notice the ground was gone until she was standing on air. She cornered him once, flatly, on the attempts on his life, and he told her she was very beautiful when she was suspicious, and asked whether she had always frowned like that, or whether he might take some credit. He gave her nothing she could use, and a great deal she did not know what to do with. Worse, the wild ones liked him. That was the thing that undid her theories one by one, because her gift had never lied to her in her life. The Nearpacks, who fled the scent of any court wolf, who would not come within a bowshot of Corlys or his lords, came to the tree line when Emmerich walked it. An old grey she-wolf who had let no hand but Sorrel's touch her in 6 years, put her head under the king's palm and leaned. And when Sorrel reached along the warm threads of them to ask why, the answer came back simple and certain, and without any of the wrongness the hollow things carried. This one is true. He does not smell of 2 things at once. She did not know what to do with a lie detector that liked the man she was trying to distrust, and somewhere in those long working days, watching him for danger, she stopped watching him for danger and simply watched him. It crept up on her like a fever. The way he tipped his head back against the doorframe of the blade store while she counted staves, lamplight sliding down the long line of his throat, until she lost the thread of her own tally. The way he laughed, a real one. Surprised out of him when she told him the duty roster was written by whoever stood nearest the seal and felt important. She caught herself looking at his mouth and was furious, and looked again. He found her at her clearing on the 14th night. It was hers, the one place in the whole march that was, a bare ring of trodden earth at the tree line where the wild ones came to her and the court did not, and she had told no one she went there. He came anyway, quiet out of the dark, and sat down on the fallen log across from her as though he had done it 100 times, and said nothing, and let the wild ones drift in around them both. "What do you want?" she said at last. It came out raw. "To sit with you. That is not an answer. Nothing you say is ever an answer. Every day you will not tell me what you are after, and you will not leave me be, and I cannot." She stopped, and made herself go on, because it was true and had been for days. "I am not built to want things I cannot have. I learned that young and I learned it hard, and you are making me want, and you will not even tell me whether it is real or whether I am a game you will set down when your border is shut." The wood had gone very still. The wild ones watched with their lamplit eyes and did not move. "Sorrel," Emmerich said, and there was no play in it at all. He rose from the log. He came around the low fire slow, the way you approach a thing that might bolt. "What if it is only that I want you? No blind, no game, only that." Men like you do not want women like me. It came out a whisper. She was staring at his mouth again. You do not believe me. He was close now, close enough that she had to tip her chin to hold his eyes. So tell me to go, and I will. I will walk back through that dark and never trouble you again. His voice dropped to almost nothing. Or ask me to prove it. The clearing was very quiet. Her pulse was very loud. The old grey she-wolf made a soft sound that was not fear. Prove it, Sorrel heard herself say. He kissed her, and every careful thing in her head went white and silent at once. His hand slid into her hair and his mouth was warm and certain, and there was no hall to laugh at her, no lord to see, only the two of them and the low fire and the sudden total fact of him. Her knees forgot their work, and then her nose caught up with the rest of her, and what it found wrecked her, his longing rolling off him plain and unhidden, the scent of a man who meant it, and it folded her resistance clean in half. She had been wanted for her sword and her gift and her use. She had never once in her life stood in the path of a man's plain wanting aimed at her, and no one else, and it undid her more thoroughly than any weapon could. She fisted a hand in his collar, and dragged him down and kissed him like she had been thinking about it for a fortnight, because she had. His arm came around the small of her back and drew her in close, and she shook with the sheer nearness of him, and the wild ones melted away into the dark to leave them the clearing, and there was nothing in the whole world but his hands in her hair, and the warmth of him, and the long tight ache under her ribs finally easing into something sweet. This was not a blind. This was not a game. This was only a man wanting her for no reason but wanting, and God's keep her, she wanted him back. It was much later, curled warm against him with the fire gone to embers, half asleep, that she felt it for the first time. A single thread, fine as spider silk, running from somewhere under her ribs to somewhere under his. And along it, faint and unbidden, came something that was not hers. A warmth, a wonder, a fear so tender it stopped her breath. His. She could feel his. She lay very still and did not tell him, and told herself it was nothing, and knew that it was not. Sorrel had stood guard at the edge of 100 holes. She had never once stood inside one as a guest. Now here she was in the hall of Greywater, in a borrowed gown, the deep green of the deep wood, the very room that had laughed her onto a bench a fortnight past, and the lords who had laughed now inclined their heads and would not meet her eye. Corliss looked as though the wine had gone to vinegar in his mouth. She should have enjoyed it. Mostly, she felt like a wolf dressed as a lady, waiting to be found out. The whole court had come down from Thornkeep to Greywater for it, the muster hall being the only seat on the march grand enough to hold 2 realms at once. The parley had brought the envoy of Castrave over the western hills, a lean grey lord named Ferron, and a train of his people, because the thing that crossed the fords did not care for borders, and Castrave had lost steadings of its own. So the whole was full of 2 realms being gracious, and in the middle of it stood Emmerich, easy and bright and untroubled, the very picture of a king with nothing on his mind but the wine. Only Sorel knew it for the performance it was. She could feel, faintly, along that thread she had told herself was nothing, how much the smiling cost him. He caught her eye across the hall, and the smile he gave her was a different one, quick and private, and heat climbed her throat. Later he drew her out onto the wall walk, where the music thinned, and the night came cool off the black line of the ghostwood, and for a while neither of them spoke. You hate this, she said, watching him. He was looking out at the wood. Hate is a strong word. You are lying. He laughed, surprised, genuine, and it turned into something tireder. I am, aren't I? He turned to face her, and the bright ease had gone out of him, and what was left underneath looked worn thin. I have been doing this since I was 19 years old. The smiling. The being exactly what the hall needs me to be, so that no one looks too closely and sees what I am not. My father died and left me a rotting kingdom and a court waiting to see if the pup would bare his throat, and I learned fast that a king who looks untroubled is a king no one moves against. I have worn it so long I cannot always find the seam anymore. His mouth twisted. Half my court believes I am a charming fool. It is the safest thing they could believe, and I built it stone by stone, and I cannot decide most days whether that makes me clever or only. He stopped, shook his head and put the smile back on, thin and defensive. Ignore me. Too much wine and not enough. She reached up and touched his face. His breath caught. The false smile crumbled clean off. "You are not what they think you are," she said quietly. "The man under all that. I have watched him for a fortnight now, and I like him. I like him a great deal." Something cracked open behind his eyes. "Sorrel," he said, rough, and kissed her. And the thread under her ribs blew wide open like a door in a storm. It was not the heat. She knew the heat by now, the wanting, the familiar pull of him. This was something else entirely, his own self pouring through the place where they touched, relief and terror and a fierce aching tenderness, and a loneliness so old and so deep it stopped her breath, all of it his, distinct and foreign and unmistakably not hers. She could feel him. She jerked back with a gasp. Emmerich's eyes were blown wide. "You felt that," he breathed. "Sorrel. I felt you. That was." He took a step toward her and she saw the hope break open across his face, raw and undefended. "That is a bond. A true one. It has been trying to set for days. I have felt it. I did not dare." He reached for her. "Tell me you felt it too." Every instinct she had, 19 years of them, screamed that a thing this good aimed at her was a thing about to be taken away. "It was the wine," she heard herself say. "It was nothing." Emmerich went still. "Nothing," he repeated. His face shuddered, the mask sliding back over the wound of it, and his voice went careful and distant in the way she had learned meant she had hurt him. "Of course. You are right. Probably nothing." A servant appeared at the head of the wall-walk stair, a tray balanced on one palm, 2 cups of wine dark as old blood in the torchlight. "Your Grace," the man murmured, and offered the tray. Emmerich did not move. He was still looking at Sorrel, and there was something in his face she could not bear. Then he turned and reached for the wine, and every wolf in Sorrel snarled at once. She did not think. Her hand shot out and struck the cup from his fingers, and it shattered on the stone, and she was already down in a crouch over the spreading dark of it, and the smell rose up and hit the back of her throat, and she knew it. God's help her, she knew it. Under the wine and the oak, bitter and cold and wrong, the exact wrongness she had smelled with her mind in a hollowed wolf past the split oak. "Do not touch it," she said, and her voice did not sound like her own. "Do not let it near you. It is the same. Emmerich, it is the same smell as the things in the wood." She stared up at him. "This did not come from over the fords. This came from your own cellar, carried up your own stair by your own servant. The thing that is hollowing your border is inside these walls, and it just tried to put you on the floor in front of 2 realms." The color drained out of his face, not from fear, from calculation. His hand closed hard around her wrist. "You will tell no one," he said. She stared at him. "Not Ferrand, not the watch, not the general, no one." His voice had gone flat and quiet and terribly steady. "There is a foreign envoy 50 feet from us, and his whole train besides. If it gets out that someone poisoned the Alpha King under his own roof with Kestrave watching, I will have a war before midnight, and a war is exactly what someone wants badly enough to reach into my cellar for it. So, it did not happen. You spilled a cup. Do you understand me?" "No." She pulled her wrist free. "No, I do not. You want me to smile and dance and pretend no one just tried to murder you?" "Yes." She wanted to shake him. Instead, he closed the space between them and pulled her hard against his chest, and against her hair he said low, "You saved my life. Again. You are the only pair of eyes in this whole keep I would trust with my back, and I need them open and I need them quiet. Can you give me that? Can you trust me for one night?" Every part of her that was still a warden said no. She could still feel the ghost of his fear along the thread she had called nothing. "One night," she said. Relief went through him and she felt that too. He pressed his mouth to her forehead, and then the mask slid smoothly back into place, the bright, untroubled king, and he went back down into the hall to smile at Kestrave as though the stone were not wet with poison behind him. She gave him a count of 30, then she followed. She kept to the edges the way she had been trained. She watched him smile and deflect like a man without a care. Watched him slip through a side door the moment the hall's attention turned, and watched the smile drop off his face the instant he thought himself unseen. He went down, not up. Down the cold stair toward the low rooms, toward the study the warden general kept at Greywater. Sorrel stood in the dark of the passage and could not make her legs obey her. Then, very quietly, she crossed to the door and opened it. Emmerich stood behind Alden's desk. The drawers were open. A sheaf of the general's private papers was in his hand. He looked up. For a long, breathless moment, neither of them moved. "Sorrel," he said, very calm, very steady. "This is not what it looks like." Emmerich always had the answer before you had finished the question. It was the most unsettling thing about him. A mind 3 moves ahead, wearing the face of a man who had never had a serious thought in his life. But now he stood behind the warden general's desk with a sheaf of papers in one hand, and he did not have an answer ready, and he paused. "Say something," she begged him without a word. Her stomach had gone to water. His jaw tightened. He set the papers down slowly, the way a man sets down a blade to show his hands. "Someone put the wrongness in your cup not an hour ago," Sorrel said, and her voice came out flat and far away. "You told me to breathe a word to no one, and then the moment the hall turned its back, you came straight down here in the dark to go through the general's private papers. So do not tell me this is not what it looks like. Tell me what it is." "I have been investigating Alden," he said. The words would not resolve into meaning. They were only sounds. "Your general." His voice had gone quiet, even gentle, the smooth, careful one he used on frightened envoys, the one he had not used on her in weeks. He was using it on her now, and that frightened her more than anything on the desk. "The vanished patrols, the grain that comes as staves, the fords left open on the nights the hollow things cross. It is not neglect, Sorrel. It never was. It is a hand hollowing this border from the inside on purpose, and every road I follow runs back to one door. He has been trading with the thing across the fords, feeding it steadings, learning how it turns wolves into weapons. When the border finally fails, when the marcher houses cry that the crown abandoned them, House Vane means to be the hand that steadies the realm after the fool king is gone. The poison in my cup tonight was the next stone in that road. With Castrave watching me die, the marches rise by dawn." "No," she said. He came around the desk toward her, not fast, careful. She stepped back, and he stopped at once, and that small courtesy was somehow the worst part of all. "That is not Alden. Alden pulled me out of the ash. He gave me the tree line when every other wolf in this realm would have left the beast girl to the winter. He is the one wolf who ever—" She stopped because underneath the noise of "not Alden, never Alden," something cold and quiet had begun assembling itself, and she could not make it stop. "You needed someone close to him," she heard herself say. "Someone he trusted past all doubt. Someone above suspicion, because everyone in the realm knew she owed him her whole life." She lifted her eyes. "That is why you kept me at your side. Not the wild ones, not my gift, me, because I was the one door into Alden that Alden would never think to guard." Emmerich said nothing. He held her eyes and did not deny it. "Say I am wrong." Her voice cracked clean down the middle. "Emmerich, say I am wrong." He looked at her a long moment, and she watched him search for the words, and he did not say she was wrong. She pressed her face into her hands. Gods, she had been stupid. All those questions, about the supply lines and the rosters, and who held the seals when the general was away, and she had thought, fool that she was, that a king found the beast girl interesting. "All of it," she whispered. "It was all a lie." "Not all of it." He came around the desk, and she retreated into the passage, and again he stopped. "Sorrel, listen to me. I will not pretend the keeping of you did not start as a way in, but it stopped being that. It stopped in your wood, the morning you knelt over a hollowed wolf and told me the one thing you were good for did not work, and I wanted to burn down everyone who had ever taught you to say such a thing about yourself. Then why not simply tell me?" She rounded on him. "If you suspected him, why not arrest him? You are the king. Being king does not make me a god." He dragged a hand down his face, and for the first time the steadiness frayed. "Alden holds the wardens. He holds the wild country lords and an old name and the loyalty of every soldier on this border. If I had seized him on a hunch, with no proof, the marches would have risen for him, and I would have handed the thing across the fords an open gate and a war behind it. Tyrants jail whoever frightens them and wonder at the knife 3 years on. I could not move on him until I had a thing not one wolf alive could argue with." It was a good answer. That was the worst of it, and she hated it for being one. "You are wrong about him," she said, knowing even as she said it that she was the one who was wrong. "There is one thing I was never wrong about." His voice gentled again, and it undid her. "You When you climbed onto that bench with nothing to gain and told me to my face that I was asleep, you said the truest thing in the realm, the thing half my court believes, and not one of them would ever dare let me hear. A wolf, with something to hide, flatters a king. You insulted me. That is how I knew in the first hour that you were no one's creature. And the wild ones will not come near Alden. They never would. You told me yourself that first day that something inside these walls wore a friendly shape and smelled of two things at once. You have known for a fortnight, Sorrel. You only did not want it to be him. And there it was. She could hear it now, if she let herself. Alden across 100 late nights, grinding his teeth over the supply lines. The crown does not care what happens out here. A king ought to know his own house. He has slept 3 years. Her words on the bench. His words first. She had carried his grievance in her mouth so long she had forgotten it was borrowed, and he had counted on that. She had been the voice he built to blame the king. You should have told me, she said, and her voice was shaking. You knew I was innocent. You watched me put my own body between you and a set of teeth. And you let me stand at your side for a fortnight and never once told me the truth of why I was there. Because I did not think you would believe me. It came out barely above a breath. I did not think you would trust me enough to turn on the one wolf who was ever kind to you. And I was right. Was I not? It hit like a slap, because it was not wrong. So she reached past it to the older wound, the one that had waited under her ribs her whole life. You let yourself believe it, it whispered. You let yourself think you could be wanted. Now look what wanting you was for. It does not matter, she said. You said it yourself. Men like you keep women like me for what they are useful for. I only forgot it for a fortnight. She turned for the passage. Sorrel, his voice cracked. Please. There is a poisoner loose in this keep and a foreign envoy asleep down the hall, and I. He caught himself and made himself find better words. I need you, please. And there it was. Even now, with her whole heart in pieces on the general's floor. Not I am sorry. Not I cannot lose you. I need you. Good night, Your Grace, she said, and walked out. It was all a lie. She got as far as the cold turn of the passage before her legs stopped, and she put her back to the stone and pressed the heels of her hands into her eyes. Gods, she was such a fool. Sorrel. Alden stood 10 paces down the passage, waiting, as though he had known she would come this way. And before she could think, she was moving toward him, because he had pulled her out of the ash and made her into someone who could stand on her own. You are white as bone, he said, his big hands coming down on her shoulders. What has he done? And because it hurt too much to hold, she told him. It was a lie. The king never wanted the beast girl. Alden's face softened into sorrow. I hope to spare you this. Everyone has known since the first night, child. Everyone but you. He drew her in, and his voice went low and grave. But it is worse than a broken heart, and you must hear it from me before he twists it. The king is the one dealing with the thing across the fords. I saw it with my own eyes not an hour past. The poison in his cup tonight, he staged himself to play the wounded lamb and lay the blame on House Vane and take the marches whole. He will fall. And there are good houses ready to steady the realm when he does, mine among them. She stood very still in the circle of his arms, and underneath the grief, a cold, clean part of her began to listen. Because the wild ones were at the walls tonight, wringing grey water in the dark, drawn by the poison wrongness and the fear. And they would not come near this tower. They fled the stone under Alden's feet the way they fled the hollowed things past the split oak. She reached gently and asked them what they smelled standing here in the passage with her. 2 things at once, they told her. The friendly shape. It smells of 2 things at once. It has for a long time. The floor did not fall out from under her. It was worse. It held. And everything settled into its true and terrible place. Alden said he had seen the king at the fords within the hour. But within the hour the king had been on the wall walk with her and then in the tower with the papers, nowhere near a ford. The timeline was a lie. The man who pulled her from the ash was lying to her face, and the man she had left broken on the tower floor had told her nothing but the truth. She had spent her whole life trusting the one wolf who had spent it grooming her to be the knife he would put in the king's back. What do we do, she said, and made her face crumple, because she had learned to give a whole nothing, and she gave Alden nothing now. His eyes sharpened. We go to the Kestrav envoy before Emmerich can. But it cannot come from me. I am only a general. They will say House Vane grasps for power. It has to come from someone they will believe without a breath of doubt. His voice went soft, almost kind, the way it had gone soft over her whole life. It has to come from you, the king's own warden, his rumored mate. If you tell Lord Ferron you saw Emmerich trade with the wrongness, not a soul will doubt it. Then let us go, she said, before I lose my nerve. It was the longest walk of her life. Emmerich was already in the council room, grey and grim across the table from the envoy. He looked up when she came in behind Alden, and for half a breath his whole face opened with hope. Then he saw who walked at her shoulder, and the light in him went out like a snuffed lamp. He thought she had come to bury him. My lord envoy, Alden said, bowing, it grieves me past speaking, but the warden here has seen a thing tonight that no loyalty to the crown can excuse. He turned, gracious and sorrowful, and held out his hand to her. Sorrel, tell his lordship what you saw. Every face in the room swung to her, Ferran leaning forward, wary. Alden's, sure of her, already counting his win. Emmerich's, open and stricken and certain she had chosen. She looked at the king. I am sorry, she told him along a thread she had spent half a night pretending was nothing. I should have believed you the first time. Then she turned to Ferron. I saw nothing of the sort, she said, because it never happened. The Warden General is lying to you, my lord, and I can prove it in a way no wolf in this room can argue with, because it is the one thing in this realm I have never been wrong about. The room snapped tight as a drawn bow. Alden went rigid at her side. He says he saw the king at the fords within the hour, she said. Within the hour the king was on the wall walk in front of 40 witnesses. That is the first lie. Here is the second. She lifted her chin and reached, and out beyond the walls she called the wild ones the way she had never dared call them into a hall of men, and asked them to come. They came, grey shapes pouring out of the dark and over the low east wall until the council room filled with the green lamps of their eyes, and the envoy's guards fell back with hands on their hilts. The wild ones flowed around the room and went to Emmerich, who stood still and let an old grey she-wolf lean her weight against his legs, and they would not go within a body length of Alden, and where he stood, their hackles rose and their lips peeled off their teeth. They will not lie for coin or kindness, Sorrel said into the silence. They know a wolf who smells of two things at once. Search his quarters, my lord, while he cannot reach them, and see whether you find a wronged realm or a paymaster's ledger and the poison that hollowed my wood. This is beast girl hysteria, Alden said, and for the first time his calm cracked. She is distraught. She does not know what she... Then a search costs you nothing, said Ferrand quietly, and nodded to his guards. And Alden ran. He came straight at her, because she stood between him and the door, and she saw the knife slide out of his sleeve half a beat before he reached her. Someone shouted her name, ragged with terror, and it was Emmerich. But this was the one thing in the whole night she knew exactly how to do. She turned into him instead of away, caught the knife arm at the wrist, and used his own weight and 19 years of border training against him, and put the Warden General face down on the council room stone, with her knee between his shoulders and his blade skittering into the dark. She leaned close to his ear. You gave me the tree line to keep me small, she said. You should not have taught the beast girl to bite. Then the guards had him and dragged him out, and it was done. The wild ones melted back over the wall into the dark. Ferrand went to see to the search. And then it was only the two of them in the emptied room, and Emmerich was staring at her as though he had never seen her before. You saved my life, he said. Even after everything, you still... I came to stop a traitor. Her voice came out flat and cold. That is all it was. The hope guttered in his face. Sorrel, the bond is real. You felt it tonight. I know you did. It does not matter whether it is real. She was already moving to the door. I stopped him because he was a traitor. Not one breath of it was forgiveness. You looked me in the eye for a fortnight and used me. A bond does not undo that. She paused at the threshold without turning. I am glad you are alive. You will be a good king. But I do not know how to trust you, and I do not know if I ever will again. And she walked out, and left the Alpha King alone in a room full of the truth she had won for him. She had been warden of the marches for half a year, and she was good at it. She had always known she would be. The border was a different country now. Alden sat in a cell beneath the old fort at Duncarrow, and the rot he had worked into the wardens for 2 decades had been cut out clean, and the thing across the fords, cut off from the friendly hand that had fed it steadings and left it gates, had been driven back into the deep dark beyond the north wood, the fords shut hard behind it. The king had done all of that. And the marcher lords who had once laughed a beast girl onto a bench now rode out at the word of the warden of the marches, and Corliss called her my lady in a voice like a man chewing stones, and she found she did not enjoy it half as much as she had thought she would. The king had made her warden. The king had also spent every one of those 6 long moons trying to win her back. He did not do it the way she had braced for. No jewels, no summons, nothing she could refuse cleanly and feel righteous about. Instead, the grain came. A fortnight after the council room, a full train of it rolled up to Thornkeep, and the spears came as spears, and masons came behind them, and raised the North Ford post new out of the ruin of the old, 9 names carved into the lintel. He fixed the border. He fixed the exact rotted thing she had climbed onto a bench to shout about, and he sent no note with any of it, as though mending what he had let rot were simply a thing owed and not a card to play. Then the letters started. They came 2 and 3 a week, in his own hand, and Neve brought them up to the loft with her eyebrows climbing higher each time. Some ran for pages. Some were 3 lines about a pension dispute or a posting on the west wall, as though her honest answer were still a thing worth having. One read only, "I keep writing the same small word 100 ways. Sorry. It is far too small for what I did, and I have not found a bigger one, so I will simply keep sending it." Another said, "You told me once you were not built to want things you could not have. I have thought about that every day since. Someone built you that way on purpose, and I would very much like to help you tear it down." She kept the bond shut the whole while. She had learned that a bond left open only deepened, and a bond deepened only set, and so she kept hers closed like a fist and hoped it would wither from neglect and let her be. It did not wither. It sat under her ribs, warm and patient and infuriating, exactly where it had always been. She rode out to the New Ford post once, alone when she thought no one would see. She had meant only to inspect it, the way she inspected everything now. But she stood a long time under the fresh-cut lintel reading the 9 names carved into it, the men who had died the night she was proven right, and she understood that he had not built it to impress her. There was no crest on it, no royal mark, nothing to say a king had raised it. He had built it because it should have stood, and let the standing be the whole of the point, and that was somehow worse than any jewel he could have sent. A jewel she could have thrown in his face. She did not know what to do with a man who simply quietly mended the thing he had broken and asked nothing for it. The wild ones, traitors, everyone, took to lying at his feet whenever he came to the tree line, which was often. He had learned to sit still. That was the thing that undid her worst. The alpha king of the realm would come to her clearing and simply sit, saying nothing, until the old grey she-wolf consented to put her chin on his knee, and he would look up and find Sorrel watching and not even have the decency to look smug about it. Rook and Neve had opinions, as they always did. "Good," Neve had said in the early weeks. "Make him grovel. You owe that man nothing." But the line moved. A month on it was, "He built the Ford post with his own coin, you know, and written you 40 letters?" 43, said Rook, who had somehow been counting. By the 5th moon they had given up all subtlety. "My lady," Neve said, standing in the door of the warden's room with her arms folded. "With respect, talk to the man." "There is nothing to talk about." "You are miserable, he is miserable, the wild ones are miserable, and the rest of us have to stand about in it like wet washing. It is unkind to the horses." "I was used, Neve." She set down her pen. "I am not queuing up for a second turn at it. I am a good warden. The border runs well. I would like to be left in peace to run it." One night in the 6th moon a letter came that was different. She knew before she opened it, the way she knew weather. "Sorrel, I am sorry. You deserved far better than a king who spent your trust instead of earning it, and better than the half a year I have spent trying to buy it back a wagon of grain at a time. You have made yourself clear, and I will respect it, because respecting what you want is the one thing I never troubled to do when it mattered. I will stop now, be well, be happy, rule my marches better than I ever deserved. Emmerich." She read it twice, then a third time. This was the thing she had wanted for half a year. No more letters, no more grain trains, no more king sitting silent at her tree line letting her wolves love him. She had won. She was free. So why did it feel exactly like losing? She was still sitting with the letter in her hand when the knock came, and Rook put his head round the door, and behind him Neve, both of them the particular grey colour of people who have made a very large mistake. "What?" Sorrel said slowly. "What have you done?" "Not us," Neve said. "Him. My lady. The king is gone." The letter went still in her hand. Gone. Off the grounds at Duncarrow, not in his chambers, not in the hall, not anywhere. His guards sent a rider half dead at the gate an hour ago. Neve swallowed, and her dry voice was not dry at all now. "No one has laid eyes on the Alpha King since the 10th bell last night. He is gone, Sorrel, and after everything that has come for his throat, no one dares say the word for what that likely means." They searched Duncarrow stone by stone, and every stone made it worse. No horse was gone from the royal stable. No coin had been drawn. His sword stood on its stand in his chamber, and his cloak hung on its peg, and the room was neat and ordered and empty, the most frightening thing of all, because a man taken by force leaves a mess, and there was none. The trackers caught his scent at the east postern and lost it there, the way a scent stops when a man has been careful, or when a man has been carried. Sorrel stood in the cold pre-dawn yard with her wardens white-faced around her, waiting on her word, and knew there was exactly one way left in the world to find him, and that she had spent half a year building a wall against it. "My lady," Rook said, "what do we do?" She pressed her hand flat to her chest, over the fist she had kept close for 6 moons. "It is only duty," she told herself. "He is the king. Finding him is my task and nothing more." It was a lie, and the wild ones would have smelled it on her, and she did not care. She opened the bond. It hit her all at once, everything she had walled off pouring through the breach. Despair first, deep and bottomless, the exact twin of the thing she had been carrying under her own ribs since the council room. Then a loneliness so old it had grown roots. Then, threaded through all of it, thick and swimming and unmistakable, drink. A great deal of drink. His thoughts coming loose and drifting. No fear in them, no captor, no cell. No one had taken the Alpha King of the realm. The Alpha King of the realm had walked out his own postern gate and got monstrously, catastrophically drunk. She was moving before she had finished the thought. Out through the gate at a dead run, the bond a rope in her fist, down into the crooked streets of the lower town where the dawn had not yet reached. Behind her, Neve shouted her name. She did not stop. The bond pulled her down and down, past shuttered shops and waking gulls, and brought her up hard outside a low tavern with warm light still in its windows. She hit the door low and ready, one hand on her knife, braced for a back room and a blade and a body. There was only the king. He was slumped half across the bar at the far end of the room, collar open, hair a complete catastrophe, one hand curled loose around a cup, talking with enormous earnestness to a barman who had plainly stopped listening somewhere around the 10th bell. Neve arrived behind her, breathing hard. "Is he?" she started. "Is he drunk?" Sorrel looked at the way he was holding onto the bar as though it might get away from him, at how when he gestured the whole top half of him swayed after his hand like a sapling in a wind. "Dear gods," Neve breathed. "He is!" Relief hit her first, a bright hot wave of it, because he was alive and whole. And then, right on its heels, came the fury, because she was going to kill him herself. She got close enough to hear. "Of course I have tried apologizing," he was saying, wounded, to the barman. "For half a year I have apologized in every shape a wolf can invent. Grain, masons, 43 letters at last count, though the counting was not mine. She will not hear a word of it." The barman made a noise that suggested he had been hearing about this for some hours. "And now I have done the one decent thing left," Emmerich went on, raising the cup, finding it empty, and holding it out. "I have stopped. I have set her free of me, as she wished. Do you know how that feels?" He considered. "It feels precisely like being hollowed out and walked around by something cold. Another, if you please." The barman sighed and poured, and caught sight of Sorrel over the king's bowed head, and his whole face flooded with the desperate gratitude of a man being rescued. She reached the bar and plucked the cup clean out of the king's hand. "That is enough." "I was drinking that," Emmerich said mournfully. Then his eyes found her face, and stuck, and blinked, and his whole ruined, miserable expression cracked wide open into something so purely, helplessly glad that it hurt to look at. "Sorrel," he breathed, And through the bond she had left carelessly, stupidly open, she felt it slam into him all at once, joy and disbelief, and a relief so vast it had no bottom. "What?" she said, low and shaking with fury. "Were you thinking? Vanishing like that? No guard, no word, half the realm certain you were murdered in your bed." "I did not vanish. I went for a walk." He frowned. It became a longer walk than intended. "You are the Alpha King. You do not get to go for a walk." "So I am told." Endlessly. He tried to pull himself upright with great dignity and nearly went off the stool. She caught him by the arm, and he came into her all warm, dead weight, and the scent she had spent 6 moons pretending not to remember, and something in her chest she had held shut for half a year began, treacherously, to open. "You will never forgive me," he said into her shoulder. It was not self-pity. It was only true, and he said it the way a man reads a verdict. "You betrayed me," she snapped, "because it was easier than the other thing." "I did not know you," he said, pulling back to look at her, blurred and earnest. "And then I did know you, and I loved you, and I was a coward, and I was so afraid of losing you that I lost you properly instead. Alden spent 19 years teaching you that you were good for one thing, for serving, for being useful, and kept at the tree line, and you believe him still. You stood in a council room and made the wild wolves of the north answer to you, and you still believe him." His voice cracked. "It is the only thing in the world I cannot mend with grain, and it is the one I would most like to." She had stopped breathing. She could feel every word of it land true through the open bond, no mask, no angle, the man who hid everything, hiding nothing at all. "That does not change," she managed. "That you should have told me." "No, it does not." He nodded gravely and swayed. "I was a coward." "Yes." "Exactly as you are being a coward now," he added, and she gasped. "You would rather strangle a bond between two souls half to death than risk being hurt a second time. I know the feeling intimately. I have been drinking about it." He wobbled a finger at her. "You are a coward, warden of the marches." "I am not," Sorrel said, outraged. "Prove it." His eyes were sliding half shut. "Marry me, I dare you." The whole tavern stopped. "What did you say?" she said. "Marry me." He tried for regal and landed somewhere near pleading. "I came down here because I could not be where you were not, and I have decided I am simply not going to leave your side again, and the polite way to arrange that is marriage, so marry me. I dare you." The bravado fell away, and what was left underneath was small and raw and entirely undefended. "I am a wreck without you, Sorrel. I will spend the rest of my days making it up to you. You climbed onto a bench and told me I owed this boarder more than an apology, and you said you meant to collect. So collect. Take the lot. Take me." He ran out of words and dropped his head into his hand. "I said I would stop asking. I lied. It is the only lie I have left." Every instinct she owned was screaming at her to let him fall into her and never let go. She was done being a fool. She was also, she was beginning to suspect, done being quite this alone. "Ask me again when you are sober," she said. "Ask me tomorrow when you can actually remember having asked." His eyes cracked open. "And you will say yes." She opened her mouth to answer, and the Alpha King of all the realm passed out cold against her shoulder, his head lolling into the crook of her neck, his breath warm and even and smelling powerfully of a truly regrettable amount of wine. And Sorrel stood there in a stranger's tavern at dawn, holding up the most powerful wolf in the world, and felt herself smile for the first time in half a year. She pressed her mouth to his forehead. His hair was soft against her lips. "Ask me tomorrow," she whispered, "and find out." In the end, it took him the better part of a season. He asked again the next morning, sober, gray about the edges, and mortified, and she told him to ask again tomorrow, so he did. He asked at the war table until Neve threatened to resign in writing. He asked badly and beautifully, and once with so many flowers, the barracks smelled like a funeral for a week, and the wild ones ate most of them. And every day Sorrel told him to ask again tomorrow, until one perfectly ordinary morning, she looked at the man grinning hopefully at her across the tree line, with the old grey she-wolf asleep against his knee, and she said yes. The whole march came out for it. The beast girl the whole had laughed onto a bench, wed to the boy king half of them had called a fool, with a guard of grey wolves along the ridge who answered to no crown but hers. Corliss looked as though the wine had gone to vinegar again. She enjoyed that enormously. Emmerich wept during the vows. She had known he would. She had sworn she would not, and very nearly held to it. But the bond gave her away, wide open now, and never to be closed again. And he laughed at her through his own tears, and she stopped caring who saw. "You are stuck with me now," he murmured when it was done. "I warn you, I do not intend to leave your side ever again." "I climbed onto a bench and proposed to collect on this border first, if you recall," said Sorel. "You are simply paying what you owe." "Best debt I ever ran up," said the king, and kissed her. And for once in her life she did not argue.